Oh, I had a cat in my lap, and now it's gone.
I could hear the purring.
Yes, Ellie. It was very bad before we started, but I
Always
guess we
has
should
something
go.
to chime in about.
I know,
Always.
little brat.
He needs his own podcast.
He does. He does need his own podcast. I don't know what he would say, but we have one, and we're going to do this mini episode. And yeah,
talk about my girl.
About your girl.
I'm very excited about this one. Why does this have to be a mini episode?
Oh, jeez.
I could go on for days.
So here we are. We're going to get ready and we're going to start our mini episode, our last in our series for the love of Poe, called From Helen. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Virginia Poe.
And I'm Levi. Leland, the one and only.
Yes.
You know who I am.
I do know who you are. Thank goodness.
Right?
I'm not sure I know who I am, but right.
I don't know who I am anymore anyway, to be perfectly honest. So.
Yay! Neither of us do. Oh,
but I do
inside
know,
jokes.
Yeah. But I do know today for tonight. I can't even say today. My windows are black on the outside. You know it's nighttime, everybody. Yes. I can't fool anyone.
Yeah.
We're
not recording these live yet.
Yeah. No.
Not yet.
We're not that brave.
Soon.
We're talking about a very special woman, near and dear to my heart, near and dear to Poe's heart at one point. Sarah Helen Whitman of Providence, Rhode Island. So my home state, my home little tiny state. I mean, here it doesn't matter what city or town someone is from. It's so close that, I can say she's right in my backyard. So, yeah. So
it is quite small.
Yeah. So, obviously she was from Providence. I'm in Coventry, and there's about a 20-minute drive difference, but 20 minutes is still so close, in my opinion, to be next to someone so, famous in history that at least I admire, and I can travel to see her anytime I want and see locations, and I'm right there. So Poe himself has some ties to Providence, mainly revolving around her, because he came to Providence in 1848 to court her. So to preface a little bit, he first came to Providence, Rhode Island in 1845. It was July, and he came to see the lecture of Frances Osgood, who we have talked about in previous episodes, but she was another, literary lady at the time. So she had invited him to come to Providence to see her lecture before the Franklin Lyceum. So he did. And after the lecture, it was late, and the two decided to take a stroll along the east side of the city. There's a lot of beautiful views and rolling hills, and especially at that time, so they would have had a lot to take in. And while they were, on their walk, it was a hot, humid, sultry night. And they eventually found themselves on Benefit Street, which Benefit Street is a really historical stretch of road. And in fact, it's the most unchanged road in the whole country. So all the structures, the whole stretch of road, all the houses are all very true to how they were in the 17 and 1800s. Obviously, there's been a lot of cosmetic stuff, but the structures themselves are all very original. So if you were to drop Poe and Helen, bring them back from the dead, drop them off on Benefit Street, they would recognize where they were. Whereas if you dropped, if you brought Poe back from the dead and dropped him off at, his cottage in the Bronx or Richmond or Baltimore or anywhere, he'd be like, where the hell am I?
Right.
So I like that little bit of information. But see, Virginia, this can't be a mini episode. I'm going to get way too carried away here. It's already 5 minutes. So to make a long story short,
got it.
They were walking on Benefit Street, and Poe caught a glimpse of this woman in her backyard. And it was like midnight, and she was in her backyard. She was clad in white shawls and veils under the moonlight. She was tending her rose garden, and she almost looked ethereal. And Poe was like, just, captured by this. And
I see it.
Yeah, right. I mean, who wouldn't?
Wow.
It's like you're almost seeing this ghostly woman, in
the
middle of the night. And ironically enough, Frances Osgood knew Sarah Helen Whitman. They were friends. They were already acquainted. So Frances Osgood, offered right then and there to introduce Poe to her. And then Poe was so adamant about not being introduced to her. He declined almost rudely, that it kind of started a little quarrel between Frances Osgood and Poe. That's what was said. So Frances Osgood was almost taken back by Poe's adamant response, And we have our third star of the show.
We have our guest star here back on my lap. I'm sure you can see his little ears.
Yeah, and a tail.
He's laying down now.
So
that's all I am. Cat furniture.
Yeah, right. That's all anybody is cat furniture, What are we? We're not people.
No.
So Poe declined, and they continued on their walk. But that woman was Sarah Helen Whitman. She was tending her roses, which she was known to be an avid gardener in her life. And I kind of looked it up because I was like, why would someone be gardening at midnight? But apparently, people who are really into gardening and who are really devoted to it would have went to go water their flowers even at midnight on a hot day like that, because they would have, So
Oh yeah.
So, and not to mention, Helen did probably stay awake long hours in the night, thinking and writing and corresponding to her, her pen pals. And so that was in 1845. That was all Poe ever knew of Whitman, and Whitman didn't even know that Poe had seen her. Whitman had no idea that Poe knew she existed even. She was just doing her thing, didn't even know Poe was in town, that he had walked by on the road that midnight and saw her and was captured by her. So 3 years later, however, in February of 1848, now Poe didn't forget Sarah Helen Whitman. Sarah Helen Whitman was very much aware of Poe. His works had become quite known in the country. So she and she was a writer herself. She was a poet herself. She was into the macabre. So she knew of Poe's story. She had read Poe's story. So she knew of Poe. And so for a Valentine soiree by the very famous salon hostess Anne Lynch, she was a popular, literary lady at the time who held these extravagant, soirees. She hosted a Valentine party, and she, invited all the literary guests to compose a poem or a Valentine to be read at this party. So Sarah Helen Whitman was invited to write a poem. Now, it was happening in New York, so she didn't travel to New York to attend, but she did submit a poem. And that poem was titled To E.A.Poe. And Virginia is going to be so kind as to share it
I'm going to
us.
attempt to do a little
It's a
interpretive
tough,
reading of it.
yeah, definitely. It's definitely
I'm going to
interpretive.
attempt. And I'm sorry, I've got to assume the librarian position again.
Yes, which is fine. Nothing
Okay.
wrong with a
Yeah.
librarian.
So for the people that can't see what I just did, I put on my glasses and then I kind of tilted my head a little and like looked at and I put my finger to my mouth. So I'm sure some of the people who actually know me and have seen me with my glasses on, I'm sure they're getting the image and they're probably giggling, and that's fine.
It's a
So
look.
yes,
So
it's a look. It's that classic librarian, like shh.
yeah.
Look. Only I was doing it more playful. Anyway, to the poem. I'm going to attempt this as best I can with a cat in my lap. I haven't read it with a cat in my lap, so here we go. All right. So, to E.A.Poe, A Valentine, February 1848. O thou grim and ancient raven, from the night's plutonic shore, oft in dreams thy ghastly pinions wave and flutter round my door. Oft thy shadow dims the moonlight, sleeping on my chamber floor. Romeo talks of white dove trooping amid crows athwart the night, but to see thy dark wings swooping down the silvery path of light, amid swans and devilets stooping, were to me a nobler sight. Oft amid the twilight glooming, round some grim ancestral tower, in the lurid distance looming, I can see thy pinions lower, hear thy sullen storm cry booming through the lonely midnight hour. Oft this workday world forgetting, from its toil and curtain snug, by the sparkling embers sitting on the richly broidered rug, something round about me flitting glimmers like a golden bug. Dreamily its path I follow in a bee-line to the moon, till into some dreamy hollow off the midnight sinking moon, lo, he glides away before me, and I lose the golden boon. Off like Proserpine I wander on the night's plutonic shore, hoping, fearing while I ponder on thy loved and lost Lenore, till thy voice like distant thunder sounds across the distant moor. From thy wing one purple feather waft o'er my chamber floor, like a shadow o'er the heather, charms my vagrant fancy more than all the flowers I used to gather on Idalia's velvet shore. Then, O grim and ghastly raven, wilt thou to my heart and ear be a raven true as ever, flapped his wings and croaked despair? Not a bird that roams the forest shall our lofty eyrie share.
Brava.
I got through it.
You did it. Seamlessly, too, if I may add.
Thank you.
Very well
done.
It was
Not one.
It is a mouthful. The poem is a mouthful, and I must admit,
my gosh.
her revised version, Woo. Which is titled
let's talk
The
about
Raven.
That real quick.
Yeah, the revised version is titled The Raven, and she made a lot of edits to it. It's almost like a whole new poem, but there's it's still so similar to that one that she couldn't have made it a whole separate poem. It was a revised version of that one, but the revised version is much easier to read. It flows a little bit better, though it's not such a mouthful. But to stay true to the Valentine theme of this month, we wanted to read the original Valentine that was submitted to Poe.
Yeah.
And so little did Helen know, Poe was not invited to this soiree. He had already been shunned at this point. It's 1848. Now you have to remember the whole letter scandal was between 1845 and 1847. So
the waggling of many tongues.
yes, that was them.
that scandal.
Which it kind of this whole month worked out for us as far as like the story goes, because we've covered
really
these things in order.
Sure.
We didn't even really do it on purpose. It just happened to be that way.
No, it just happened that way. Yeah.
So Helen did not know that, Poe wasn't going to be there. Poe wasn't going to hear this poem. So one of the things that Anne Lynch did for this particular soiree was that she was going to publish all the valentines that were submitted, or the ones that were handpicked by her, the ones she thought were the best, and the poems that came from her friends per se. So, they got a little special treatment there where their poems got picked to be published in the home journal.
Sure.
And of course, Sarah Helen Whitman was one of these friends and one of these respected poetesses that, would have had her poem published. But they didn't want to publish it because they were trying to salvage her character and reputation, because Poe was such a unscrupulous, scandalous, sleazy, destitute guy at this point, shunned out from this circle of people that, they were like, oh, they advised her, no, like, you don't want to gain his attention. You don't want to show a public, admiration for him because it's going to make you look bad, And Frances Osgood even wrote to Helen directly at this point. She was like, and I'm quoting it the best I can, but she said something like, beware of the raven swooping down into your little dovecot in Providence, and something along those lines, where she was warning her, like, watch out, because at this point there was this whole thing with Poe and Osgood that had happened. So this wasn't looking good for Poe, and apparently for Helen, because they were all advising her not to. She didn't care. She said, no, I wrote this poem for him and I want him to sing it. This is my tribute to him. He's a genius. I admire his work, and I want him to see this tribute. So she didn't give a censored so we don't get an R rating on Spotify. She wasn't taking any what. So she said, publish it. And they did. So Anne Lynch, she submitted it. She published it in the home journal. And then, of course, Poe saw it, and he was just, touched by this tribute, by this woman that he had seen 3 years prior, and still remembered, she had left that perpetual mark on his mind. And so he responded with a poem he ripped out of his volume of poems to Helen. So it just happened that the poem to Helen, the original one he wrote for Jane Stannard, was, they shared the name Helen. So he tore it out, sent it to her, kind of as, just a response to her Valentine, to show that he had read it and that he was, giving her the attention back. And so she got this poem, and, she read it, but, he had submitted it to her unsigned, so it was anonymous. So she didn't know it came from Poe, but she probably kind of had a feeling, but she didn't know for sure. So she just ignored it. She didn't make any big, to do about it. And then Poe was kind of like, all right, so what's going on here? Like, I sent her this poem back. I'm not getting any response. He sent her another poem titled it wasn't titled at the time. He titled it To Helen later, but he sent her another poem written specifically for her.
For her, yeah.
Which is the one we know today as To Helen.
As To Helen.
The longer one. And this poem recalled the time he saw her in the Rose Garden in 1845 under the moonlight, in an enchanted garden of 1,000 roses. So it was very personal. It was very direct. And so
Mhm.
this time she was like, oh, okay. You know, she was a little bit more.
Oh, that's for me.
Right, exactly. She was swooned by this one. So
Sure.
it did the trick. So the next thing Poe did to secure, you know, a meeting with Helen is he posed as an autograph collector under the pseudonym Edward S.T. Gray.
Mhm.
He sent her a letter requesting her autograph. He did this to pretty much confirm that she was still at the address that she was in Providence on Benefit Street. So she responded to the autograph with her signature, responded
Right.
to him. And of course, like the mail back then, you weren't sending a letter to someone's address. You were sending it to the post office in their city or town. They would go pick it up. You know, you would just put the name on it. So, but when you returned a letter, inside you could write your address at the top right-hand side. So that's what she had done. So this pretty much confirmed she was still in Providence. Poe came in September of 1848, and they began a courtship. He called on her at her house on Benefit Street. And, you know, the rest I could go on for, like I said, days, but essentially very tumultuous romance, a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happened here in Providence with Poe.
Sure.
You know, I've dedicated a whole website to it if anyone wants to visit it and learn more. Or if you're ever in Providence, Rhode Island, I made a walking tour, so I will happily guide you on that. So I could just leave it at that plug. But long story short, it didn't work out, and Poe died less than a year later. So
yeah.
But that was Helen's tribute to Poe. That was Helen's Valentine, and one of the few Valentines besides Virginia's that we know of that was written to Poe. So, and I'm, you know, for time's sake, I'm trying to keep it short. This was a bad subject for a mini-sode for me because
because you're like, I have so much to share.
I'm like, I could talk if someone let me for hours, which is I think the reason why I made a tour was so that people had no choice but to listen to me talk for a couple hours,
about Helen anyhow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
About Poe, about Helen, you know, it's great. So, but yeah, if you're curious for more information, visit my website or come to Rhode Island and
go on
my tour.
I've actually never been to Rhode Island.
You should.
I mean, I've been to Connecticut a ton of times, and
it's right there
in Salem a lot. So I mean, I might.
It's only a couple hours. Yeah, you might as well. Next time you're in Salem, it's a good excuse.
Shame on me, Levi.
My mission, right, is so we have Poe Baltimore, we have Poe Boston, we have Poe Richmond, we have Poe Philadelphia, Poe the Bronx. We have all these, but like Poe Rhode Island, Poe Providence. Like he didn't live here, but
he spent time there.
He spent time here, and there was substantial things that happened here that
with him.
Yeah.
And to him.
Right? I mean,
when this is important.
Yeah. When I, you know, tell you, think of a picture of Edgar Allan Poe, I think I know which one you're thinking of, right?
Sure.
Everyone does. Everyone has that same picture of Poe in their head. That was taken right here in Providence.
I didn't know that.
Yes, the Ultima Thule.
Do I have to hand my card in?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, especially with me. Yes. Ugh. I'm so disappointed in you.
Oh my God, I really didn't know that.
Yes, that was taken in Providence.
Oh, for shame.
So the Ultima Thule.
That's it, I'm fired.
And Sarah Helen Whitman was the one that named it Ultima Thule.
Fired.
Yeah, you're fired from. This is it for ladies and gentlemen.
Last podcast, everybody.
This is the last one. Yeah, from now on, this podcast will be known as the Edgar Allan Poe Rhode Island podcast with your host Levi Leland, and that's it.
Elliot wants to know if he can be your new co-host.
Yes, he can, as long as he knows where that photo of Poe is taken.
Oh my God.
And then the other daguerreotype of Poe with the great coat.
Yes.
And that was taken in Providence, Rhode Island as well, just days after.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 2 very, very famous likenesses of Poe were taken here, along with his courtship with Helen.
I fail.
Yeah, you
I
know, and then
failed.
Poe's famous, well, I shouldn't say famous, but Poe's very, you know, very known suicide attempt, the only one in his life, with the laudanum.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
obtained that laudanum here in Providence
Yeah.
and then boarded the train to Boston. But yeah, so my goal is really just trying to put Providence, Rhode Island on the map as like a Poe city, a Poe site, because it really, otherwise, a lot of Poe folk don't consider it a Poe place, like a Poe destination.
I
But
mean, I guess people like you and I do,
yeah,
but
in a way, like, but even some of the real like diehard Poe fans that, like, I had a Poe fan come this past, well, last year, from Ohio, and you know, she was like, "Wow, like this is a Poe site. Like this is a Poe city. This puts Poe on the map here. You know, like just like Poe Baltimore, just like Poe Richmond, just like Poe Boston."
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's been quite an evening for us.
It's been fun.
It's been fun, but perhaps a little punchy. It's been a long week, but we hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. We hope you learned a little something about Rhode Island and Poe. And yeah, we'll be back next week with a whole new month of episodes. And if you haven't been on Facebook yet this week, we left a little present on there for you since we've gotten over 100 downloads. Woohoo! But we actually started a playlist on Spotify. It's called Beyond the Oblong Music Box. See what I did there?
Very catchy, Virginia.
Yes, thank you.
Bravo, once again, bravo.
Yes. I can come up with some titles, let me tell you. But it's totally lots of different styles of music, lots of different performers. It's either music from the time of Poe, music about Poe, and then, of course, interpretations of his works. So as the weeks roll on, of course, we'll add more and more things, but we hope you enjoy. And if you have any suggestions to put in the Oblong Music Box, then just leave a little message for us in that post on our Facebook page, and we will get to it. And make sure you check us out on Instagram, of course, on Facebook. You can drop us a line at BtOB1847@gmail.com. And we'll see everybody in March.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Levi.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.